All right, I'm super excited about today's conversation. So I'm here with Bradley Rencher. I like to call him Bradley affectionately.
You and my mom.
Yes. Talking about all things your business and career and leadership. It's the Leader on Leader podcast. I was fortunate. They said, hey, you can pick any two leaders you want to interview. And one of them is definitely Brad, because he's a great example and a mentor to me in the Utah community. So here we are. Thanks for joining us.
Looking forward to the conversation, and it's we should cover some ground, and it is one that Brock, just to give you a shout out as we get started, there was a time that I was like, hey, would you want to work with Brock Blake? And the person across the table was like, yes, let's go.
Yeah, right.
So from a leadership standpoint, you also set and blaze a really broad trail in terms of wanting people to come and engage and build with you. So it should be a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks. So let's start back in the day. I know, obviously, Bamboo today, BambooHR.
Yep.
But your journey started, you were not kind of on the executive route. You were in the banking route, right? Started your career, was it back in, was it New York?
Yeah, I am a reformed investment banker. I started in investment banking, a couple different platforms, RBC Capital Markets, Morgan Stanley, and was headed down doing all the IPO, all the M&A work. And that's where things got started for me.
So why banking?
Because none of us know what we want to do in college. To where I think I was a finance grad and was like, hey, you're studying hard, you're doing all this stuff. What's the next step? And I had an uncle. Shout out to Sepio Capital and Roger Carter, who was at Goldman Sachs doing private wealth management. And I'm like, well, what is that all about? And then ended up finding the corporate finance thing, and just had the Morgan Stanley platform was just incredible to work on the IPOs and to start to rub shoulders with these founders and these business builders. That ultimately planted the seed to say, hey, maybe I can do what they do.
Right.
Maybe there's a different path for me. And that's really where that, this is like inception, to where like an idea gets planted deep in the brain. And as it grows, you're like, actually, I got to do something about that.
So what was the highlight of your banking career that you look back, man, like that was amazing?
Yeah, and this actually ties a little bit into the Utah story. One of the highlights for me in banking was working with Josh James and Mike Herring and Chris Harrington, John Pastana, on the Omniture IPO. This is mind-blowing for people to realize. That was the second IPO after Salesforce.com. And now in the age of AI, there's all this conversation like, hey, SaaS is so like the last few decades, it's all about these new platforms. But I remember going and trying to figure out how we were going to explain to investors, these public market investors, how the SaaS model worked, because it was so like, it was the discontinuity there was so big. It's like, what do you mean you're spending all this money in servers, but you only get the revenue over the next 2 or 3 years? And Salesforce was the only one that had done it before. And so it was, I think about a highlight to start to educate how the investing world thinks about SaaS investing, which is now really the way investments happened. Everyone understands that model. That was not always the case. And Josh and John and Chris and Mike Herring and the entire Omniture team really kind of blazed that trail. So that was a really, really fun project to be a part of.
And then, so Josh is I think at the time was the youngest CEO to take a company public, if I remember right, or close to.
Close to, for
and
sure.
He was a little bit of a maverick. So how was that, working with Josh, and he still is a maverick. Love you, Josh. Working with Josh and helping him, doing that roadshow and all of that.
So Josh and I think our birthdays a week apart. And I remember working on that. And I think it actually was a secondary, to where we did a secondary. I think we did it on it priced on his birthday. I was like, well, Josh, congratulations. You sold a bunch of stock as a selling shareholder. And I was like, I came into my birthday working, 100-hour weeks, and I hadn't slept for 4 days. So these are different. But Josh, I remember standing at the IPO pricing. We had just finished our last investor meeting. We were on the street in New York, and we had dialed into the call where all the capital markets teams are talking about, well, this is the demand and this is where it's going to price and how that all works. And it was a lot to be through. I don't remember how old Josh was. He's probably 31, 32. And standing on the street in New York, pricing a SaaS IPO that no one exactly knew how to think about, like we talked about. and to watch him make a decision standing on the street with all the street noise around the future of his company and watching him do that, like I was inspired by the courage that it takes to actually step into the unknown. It didn't price exactly the way that we thought. It was different. And to take that all in and to be able to make a decision in the moment taught me a lot about courage in the face of adversity, sometimes that it takes to be a founder and a business builder.
Love it. So how did you make the transition from investment banking to an executive operator role?
If you've ever seen the movie We Bought a Zoo, I mean, it's an incredible movie.
Right.
But Matt Damon is in that movie, and there's a part in there where he buys a zoo. But he talks about what happened, and I think he was asked a question on how he met his wife, and he was telling his kids about having 30 seconds of courage. Like sometimes in life, you just got to have 30 seconds of courage and ability to do something different. And for me, I shared my leadership journey. I had this idea that I think I can be a business builder. I think I would enjoy leading, building businesses, starting businesses, building culture, teams, all those things. I didn't know the path. And one day, Josh James at Omniture, I had worked on several transactions for them. I was living in the Bay Area. He called and said, "Hey, we want to do a bunch of M&A. We've got a little bit of a currency. We want to build the platform through M&A. Come over and help us do some of this M&A work." And I could do that. Like, that's what I had been doing. I mean, at the time I was working with Oracle, Cisco, the Facebook IPO was just ramping up. Like, I was involved in a lot of cool stuff that was happening in the Valley, but I had 30 seconds of courage to ask for what I actually wanted, even though my resume, it didn't justify any of that. And so I just said, "Hey, Josh, I'll come and do the M&A. But when there's a chance, and if there's a chance, I'd love to run part of the business, all the business, whatever's there, just because I think I can do it." And Josh said, "Okay, let's do it."
I love it.
And that's one of the superpowers of, I think, business builders and entrepreneurs is, can you spot talent in unlikely places? Like I said, if you had AI scan my LinkedIn of that day, they would have been like not the right person to put into an operating role. Josh didn't care. Like, I look back and, the pivot point in my career, I put a lot of that at Josh's feet, just saying, "Hey, he saw something to do it." So that's where it really came from. I landed at Omniture, helped with the M&A integration, did all these things. And 9 months later, the world changed again.
It's amazing. You think about investment banker and you think about the skill set that it takes to do that. It's relationship building. There's a lot of relationships. You're connectors, right? Yeah. You're doing a lot of deals. But to that point, you're not thinking about kind of necessarily operating a business, growing a business, building out teams, managing teams, and all of that kind of stuff. And that's like kind of, I think, one of your most amazing talents is that ability to lead and manage a team. And so, probably felt good to be able to make that transition from, a role that was using a lot of your skill set, but then expanded this entirely new kind of skill set for you.
Yeah, this is where it's a travesty to me that some of our brightest undergrads and graduate students just get sucked straight into banking and consulting, because banking consulting have a place. It's amazing, but it's like you get such a small view of what does business building entail, because as an investment banker, you do an M&A deal and you're like, "Hey, like, mission accomplished. We got this deal done." That's when the magic begins,
right?
Is when you're actually putting the businesses together to go and build. And same thing as a consultant. I come in, I do a project, and I say, "Hey, go take this and go build your business." That's like such a small sliver of what it is. There's this magic that happens on the other side in terms of building teams, culture, products. And that, for me, is where truly, like, the magic, the love of what I do and what I get the opportunity to do really has popped for me. So message is, careers are nonlinear.
Right.
Where you start isn't where you finish.
Yep.
And it's not like I'm not an artistic individual. But in elementary school, I remember there were those dot to dot, like, pictures where you would draw and just like connect 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. And then it becomes this amazing picture. And you're like, that's not the way careers are.
Right.
Careers aren't, you connect 1 to 2. Sometimes you connect 1 to 5 and then 12 to 7. And you're like, why am I going backwards? Well, you're going backwards for growth.
Yeah. So I would love to, we probably don't have time on today's podcast. I wish we had more time, because I want to hear, like, actually give us the 30-second about, you're now at Omniture. alongside Josh, and you've got the Adobe coming in from the Bay Area and looking at making that acquisition. And I think that was a real pivotal moment in Utah's kind of tech history. Can you just talk about from your perspective, being right in the middle of that?
Yeah, maybe I'll take that in two steps. First step is kind of acquisitions and how those work.
Mm-hmm.
Like McKinsey's actually got an adjacency model where if you're thinking about doing acquisitions, they say, hey, if you're one step adjacent, that means you share customers, you share market segment, you share all these kind of common characteristics. And they have an adjacency model that says your probability for success in a one-step adjacent deal is much, much better than a two-step and a three-step and a four-step. Well, by definition, the acquisition of Omniture by Adobe was a five-step adjacent. Didn't share the same market segment, didn't share the same customer,
wow.
Didn't share the same product kind of integration philosophy, and it should have failed, but it worked. And I remember the first calls after that deal closed, Gartner, Forrester were like, we don't get it. Why is Photoshop buying web analytics? It makes no sense. And that's where this whole marketing cloud category was created,
right.
Was basically at the genesis of that. And so as you're thinking, my message is, if you're doing acquisitions, I think history favors the bold. And that doesn't mean you're going to be successful. You might fail spectacularly, but it favors big, bold bets to change the trajectory of a business. So that's kind of first step, I would say, on Omniture Adobe. Second one is, after the acquisition, what was the history of Utah, technology up to that point? We stand on the shoulder of giants like WordPerfect, Novell, all these things. But entrepreneurs have been building businesses for a long time, and we had a hard time really scaling businesses in the state. If we're being self-critical, I think we played small ball a lot with our mindset. We just said, "Oh, we just got an offer for $25 million. I'm out. Let's sell."
Yep.
And I think Omniture was one of the first that Josh and John and Mike and the team we're going to be more bold. And through the Omniture acquisition really kind of set the stage. But what had happened with acquisitions is a lot of times the acquirer from outside the state, after it closed and the dust settled, what happened?
They would shut them down. They would move them to a different location, right?
Hey, we're going to move headquarters back to the Bay Area. Hey, if you'd like to come to the Bay Area and work, or to Boston, or to, Austin. There were very few acquisitions that they stayed in the state and not just maintained the headcount, but chose to grow it dramatically. And this is, I actually think, one of the most interesting pivot points in the history of Silicon Slopes. Acquisition of Omniture, one of the breakout stars. Adobe, rather than leaning out, leaned in. Mm-hmm. And there was a small group of people, Mike Herring, Justin Judd, a bunch, all the leaders who were there, to where Adobe took a look at the leadership and the talent that was available here and said, we're going to stay. And not just we're going to stay, we're going to invest deeply. That building at the point of the mountain was the result of 2 or 3 small group conversations that happened in the Silicon Valley that was advocating for the state of Utah. And I think about, if that decision would have gone different, what would have Silicon Slopes would it have been? I mean, maybe it would have been the same, but certainly I think the point of the mountain would look different. Certainly having a top 5 software company on the planet here has provided us a foundation to build from. So for me, as I look at the history of Silicon Slopes, I'm like, they say history swings on small hinges. That was a different decision could have really put the state in a different place.
That's crazy to think about. And also, I don't know how many people realize that you were square in the middle of that, right? Josh ends up retiring from Omniture. He obviously got his exit and whatnot. And then, you're really running and leading the building that's being, established there at the point of the mountain. How many employees, did Adobe have here in Utah? I mean, you were what, number 2, number 3 to Shantanu?
Yeah. So so the reason why Adobe decided to stay in the state wasn't for any one leader. Yes, I reported into Shantanu as making that case with Mike and Justin and Wade Sherman and all the great people who were there. But it was the culture, the team that was here. They looked at the graduates coming out of the University of Utah and BYU, Utah Valley University, and said, there's something here.
Right.
It's an hour and a half from the Silicon Valley. We can get people in and out. We're in.
Yep.
So that's where that decision, I think, really stemmed from. At the end of the day, people businesses and people will primarily act in a self-interested manner. Adobe wasn't doing it to help build the state. Adobe was doing it because they had a bold vision for what it was going to become, and the team in the state was articulating what that vision was going to be and what it was going to do for the state of or for Adobe, and then ultimately the state of Utah.
Yep.
I mean, I think the business at the time that Adobe acquired Omniture was probably doing $300 million in ARR. It's a big business.
Right.
I mean, Omniture had been wildly successful. That business today is probably $4.5 billion in ARR, and started right here, grown right here, and now there's people all over the world. At the time that I left in 2019, the business unit that I was running, that was one of the two business units at Adobe, I think there were 10,000 people in that business, and across multiple different organizations. But it's just been a wild and it was a wild ride, but a big business success for Adobe.
So we have this first chapter, which is in banking. Your second chapter was the Omniture, and then leading Adobe, and then at some point in, you mentioned in 2019, you decide, okay, it's probably time for me to kind of step away. Talk to me about the emotions you felt and the impetus why you felt like, hey, it's the time for me to kind of take a step back. I mean, obviously, well, yeah, let's go there.
Yeah, thank you. I loved building at Adobe. It's an incredible place. But I think sometimes you have to look at a situation and say, hey, I think sometimes businesses need a new voice, a new perspective. And I was finding that I was finding less joy in the work. I almost became more of an administrator than a business builder. Mm-hmm. And I knew that there was something basically on the other side. When I left Adobe, I did not know what I was going to go do.
Right. Yep.
And actually, it actually ties into Bamboo and the crazy happenstance that went there. So I texted a few people before the press release hit, and one was Fraser Bullock. And we all know Fraser. He's been a mentor of mine for a long, long time.
Yep.
And I texted him and said, hey, in a few minutes, this press release is going to hit. I'm going to leave Adobe, and just wanted to let you know. And he texted right back, I'm kind of between meetings, and still, I haven't even told my team yet. And Fraser had texted back. He's like, well, that's crazy, blah, 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 blah. You got to talk to the guys at Bamboo. You got to talk to them. And Fraser and Sorensen Capital are one of the investors in Bamboo. Right. And they just had conversations that, maybe as they scale the business, that they were looking, Ben and Ryan were looking is there someone who can come in and help us scale? And that's where that conversation started.
Got it. So you take a little bit of time off. You hadn't even left yet. And all of a sudden, and Fraser, of course, is already recruiting you, right? So you get to spend some time with your family and decompress a little bit. And, what was it about Bamboo that pulled you back into the game that got you excited to go build in?
Maybe one thing just for leaders and business builders, just on taking a little bit of time. I had, really up to that point in my career, not taken more than a week off. Mm-hmm. And it had been 15, 20 years of just like go. And it was interesting. I kind of really was transitioning in January, February of 2019. In March of 2019, I was flat on my back for the entire month, to where I was having like my body was falling apart.
I remember
and
that,
I was
actually.
like, what is happening? And as I reflect back on that now, I actually think it was my, like, the physical toll that had taken. I don't think I was listening to what was happening physically to my body, just like all those things for all those years. And it was like, as the stress at work came down, it was like, okay, now's the time that we can let all this go. So message, don't be an idiot like me. Take care of yourself.
I do remember that. You were like,
I was down,
your
back, my
rough.
leg. I had like nerves going crazy. A doctor said to me, he's like, nerves are weird, dude. And I'm like, I couldn't move. So that's kind of first message in doing that. But I got introduced to Ben Peterson and Ryan Sanders. Ben Peterson and Ryan Sanders are two of the best founders and entrepreneurs in the state, hands down.
Amazing. Yep.
And they're incredibly humble and gifted in terms of how they build people and culture. Mm-hmm. And I met with them, and they had this tiger by the tail. And my first meeting, it was incredible. And I had met Ben once before. His team, basketball team, and my basketball team at the most contested basketball tournament in the state, which is the BYU Intramural Championship.
Okay.
My basketball team we beat Ben Peterson's basketball team in the finals.
We probably need to get him
where
here.
I have the intramural T-shirt.
Let's go.
And so Ben and I had run across each other many years before, and so we had a good laugh about that. But as we talked about the business and who they were, my message to them is, you don't need me.
Yeah.
You don't need me. You guys are incredible. The business is incredible. Because the Bamboo business is really to help people start businesses and scale those businesses. Technology companies, construction companies, manufacturing companies, healthcare companies, and they had just built this beautiful business. I'm like, you don't need me. Go. I'll help any way I can, but just keep going.
Right.
It took about 10 months for us to kind of say, oh, does this feel good or not? And guess what? That, for me, like, if any of you have ever, if I've ever called you to maybe recruit you into an executive position, I am so slow at recruiting, especially executives. It's like, hey, let's have another conversation. Hey, let's do another lunch.
Right.
Let's meet some more people, because the stakes are so high for both sides. So Ben and Ryan and I took our time on this to make sure that there was a values and culture match before we really moved it forward.
Yeah. You talk a lot about what attracted you is obviously the platform, the culture. Now you've got this business kind of continues to be a tiger by the tail, continues to grow. How many employees do you have? Rough estimate now?
We've got about 1,500 Bambooligans is what we call ourselves, Brock.
1,500.
Doesn't that sound
not
fun?
Employees, team members. How do you maintain an incredible? I think it's the Dunbar number, or whatever. There's some scientific number that above a certain number, it makes it really significantly more challenging to maintain a special culture. But you hear all the time about the culture that is Bamboo. What do you know that you could teach other leaders about maintaining that culture when you continue to scale and get larger?
It's hard, and I think about it all the time. But the first thing is you got to check your mindset. Am I playing defense with my culture, like trying to protect? Like, oh wait, you can't come, like, this is locked. This culture's locked. Every recruit, because we've gone from, over the last couple of years, 400 employees to 1,500. So, we've hired a lot. So are you playing defense with your culture? Or are you playing offense? And I like to think about playing offense to where if I'm recruiting you to come into Bamboo, I'm like, come and add to us.
Yeah.
Add to the culture, make us better, as opposed to like, hey, try to figure out the culture and how you fit in. No, come in, like, it's living. Right. It's happening there. So that's one. Are you playing offense or defense? Two, you have to own it. And so for us, we do monthly all hands still today. Once a quarter where they're in person, the other time is on Zoom, so everybody's there. And every all hands, we start with mission. First slide out of the gate after the confidentiality slide is like, here's our mission. What's our mission? Is we set people free to do great work. We have 3 million people on the platform. Isn't it amazing that 3 million people come in? We can help them be better at their job today. That makes the difference. Next slide is vision. It's like, we want to be the #1 HR platform on the planet. 3, values. And we start everyone. We do a quarterly leadership summit. My first slide in our quarterly leadership summit, which is for the top couple dozen leaders at Bamboo. First slide is, here's what I expect of leaders. 1, that you connect with our mission, vision, and values. You don't have to tell the story like me, but you have to be able to influence and be able to convince people that you believe in what we're doing. So it can be different. So my #1 expectation of leaders is you can lead to that. If you can't be a leader at Bamboo.
Love that.
And we can talk about the other 2 kind of pillars of leadership at Bamboo, but culture, mission, vision, values is, it's there. I learned it was different. Candidly, I was a little jaded coming into Bamboo to where I'm like, yeah. Like, as an investment banker, we acquired a lot of businesses when I was at Adobe. I've heard the culture, vision, mission pitch, just like you.
Right.
How many? Thousands.
Right.
And you get a little jaded. My first day at Bamboo, I asked, there was 400 people. I'm like, hey, send me an email and tell me why you love being here. I got 400 emails, and everyone, when they talked about why they love Bamboo, used one of our values. to describe it. One of our values is to do the right thing. One of our CX support reps would say, when I'm with a customer and I don't know what to do, I think about the value of do the right thing, and it helps me make better decisions.
Yep.
Perfect. And so that's where I was like, a light bulb went off, and I'm like, this is different.
So let's talk about, can we just pull on that string a little bit on the leadership principles? So when you do these leadership retreats, you said, one of them is they have to be able to articulate the mission and vision and values.
Yep.
What are some of the other guiding principles for you that you believe in, that guide you, and that you train your leaders on?
These leadership summits that we do, we do a full day. So one day a quarter, we have the top leaders, and we're talking about, and we'll take a business problem, we'll go deep on that, and I'll do a State of the Union. And in my State of the Union, the leadership principles that we are locked in on at Bamboo. So one, we talked about, you have to authentically connect to the mission, vision, values. 2, you have to run your function with excellence. That's like table stakes, but like if you're running marketing or sales or an engineering team, expectation as a leader here is you're running it with excellence, not okay, with excellence. And excellence only comes through sustained outcomes towards that. So that's pillar 2. Pillar 3 is your ability to influence and inspire. I've found that as you scale a business from 10 employees to 100 to 1,000 to 2,000 to 10,000, the leaders who can run their function with excellence, combined with that commitment to mission, vision, values, the ones that actually end up getting tripped up, your ability to actually execute when it's no longer in a particular silo, you have to be able to influence. You don't control anything. You don't have that. Too many leaders want to continue to do the command and control leadership.
Right.
So your ability to, you don't work for me, but can I influence you? Can I inspire you to build something together to go get something done? That is a leadership principle as you scale. Yep. To me, quickly becomes even more important than running your function with excellence. But both have to be in tandem.
Yep. So those three.
That's it. The connection to mission, vision, values, run your function with excellence, and the ability to influence and inspire.
Okay, just a couple more questions and we'll wrap up. So we have a personal relationship that we've had for a long time. I know the demands for you outside of your day-to-day job at Bamboo, obviously this career, are really high. How do you think about your influence, and managing family responsibilities, community, church, other responsibilities that you have? I know in every single way. What I love about Brad is that you show up authentically. In fact, a quick story. One of our first times when we were at dinner together, we walked away. We were you and Sarah, your spouse, my wife Kim, and others. And a lot of times you go to those dinners, and sometimes each like my wife, for example, would sometimes be like, I don't really like going to these dinners because you guys, you might have a conversation and no one's really paying attention to me or asking, and we walked away from that initial dinner, and Kim said, what I love about Brad and Sarah, your wife, is that your attention to every single person around the table. Kim, how are you doing? How are you feeling? A conversation around her, and it was just like inspiring. We walked away from that dinner. And so you show up authentically, you care about people kind of everywhere you go. Just how do you respond to that? How do you think?
Well, first, that's easy because Kim's way more awesome than you.
I know. We all know that. Thank you for setting the record straight.
But this is actually something I learned from my wife, Sarah. And between my wife and a grandfather, Grant Lale Carter, you guys, he lived up in the Foothill neighborhood in Salt Lake City forever. Just passed away a few years ago at 99. He was one to where when you talked to him, there was no confusion on where it was. I think business builders, if you love to build product, you love to build businesses. I think the third pillar of that is you got to love to build people. Mm-hmm. And we in our family, we talk about we're builders. Mm-hmm. We're builders. I expect when my kids, anyone that they're talking to, after someone gets done interacting with them, that they feel more hopeful. They feel better about, hey, I can go accomplish these hard things that are going on in my life. Because let's face it, in our business, I got 101 problems at Bamboo. There's we got so many things we got to go do. At home, there's 101 problems we need to go fix. In our communities, we see everything that's happening in society. There's 101 problems. but I think the power of builders, optimistic builders, because I think optimism is a force multiplier for everything. And I think as you show up and you help people accomplish those things, build towards those things that they want, it's magic. It's magic. And I don't know that I do it well. I try really hard, though, to try to build people that I'm with.
I know that you have the ability to influence thousands of college-age students on a regular basis. As you interact with this next generation, what do you see that gets you excited about the future?
First, I've got kids that are, they're university age, picking careers, picking the direction of their life. And it is such an amazing pinch point. And I love Utah's the youngest state in the country. And we have all these amazing people who are going out to set the chart for the charting the course for their life. How can we give back? We talk in the business community, how do we give back to the next generation of founders and entrepreneurs? Well, if you're a founder and entrepreneur, guess who's behind you? There's kids who are in college trying to figure out what I'm going to go do. We all can be there pulling up and help one decision. I remember talking to people when I was, back to the investment banking thing. I had no idea. If you would have asked me to say, what's the day in the life of a banker, I had no idea.
Right.
But if someone could have picked up the phone and said, this is what it's going to look like, this is what it's going to be like, could I have made better decisions, different decisions? Perhaps. And so for me, I get energy. We're in good hands. You go to Utah Valley University, University of Utah, BYU, right here on the Wasatch Front. It's like we have some incredible humans who are ready to enter the workforce and build here in the state in the coming years.
This has been so fun for me. Brad is one of my heroes and great mentor, someone I look up to, such an amazing, impactful leader in the state. So we appreciate you sharing some of that knowledge with us today.
Good to be with you, Brock.